Good morning, everybody. So our group did a project on the emotional health of dental and medical students at A.T. Still University. In our group, it was myself, Rajiv, Ryan, Adrian, John, and Josh. Next slide, please. So the PICO question, the study aim, and the hypotheses. The PICO question was, what are the psychological stressors and positive influences that can impact the mental health of students in medical and dental school throughout the COVID-19 pandemic and thereafter? The aim, so professional school is a very stressful time for students of all programs, and we hope to identify those psychological stressors and the positive influences that can impact the mental health of students, specifically in medical and dental school. Our hypothesis was that students further along in their professional schooling will be experiencing more stress than those in the beginning stages, and students who report having adequate social support will have a better overall emotional well-being. Next slide, please. So the introduction and our findings from the literature review. Previous studies indicated that professional students undergo high levels of stress throughout their education. They'll experience many mental health disorders such as depression and anxiety. The later years of their schooling generally undergo more stress than those in their early years. That they're more likely to experience greater psychological distress, significantly higher than their equivalent counterparts in the general public, and with adequate lack of social support, that they're more likely to have mental instability and a lack of self-perceived wellness. No studies were able to truly identify how much stress professional students experience, and no studies were able to identify how students cope with the stress. Next slide, please. The research methodology. So the study design was a cross-sectional study. The project was reviewed and it was deemed exempt. The study subject, so we had a total of 150 students, 61 MOSO students and 89 KCOM students. The data collection, we did a modified version of the dental environmental stress study, and the data assessment was through Qualtrics with 51 questions. It was done in both Kirksville and the St. Louis campuses. Next slide, please. The project timeline, so the most important part of this is that the study went out towards late January of this year. That's significant because, as we know, COVID has kind of ebbed and flowed and affected our school in different ways. So it's just important to note that this study and the questions went out January 23rd. Next slide, please. So the results from the med school side. For as far as workload, the first year scored significantly higher than third and fourth years. The second and third years scored higher than the fourth years, and there was a gradual decrease in workload across all 4 years. Now, workload is referring to the stress that's caused by the workload that the students are experiencing. Performance pressure, or the stress associated with that. First, second, and third years were significantly higher than fourth years. There was a significant increase between first and third years, and there was actually a decrease in the stress from performance pressure between third and fourth years. Social stressor. So an important part to note before we speak about the social stressors, a higher score actually indicates a lower level of stress. The first year scores were higher than the third year, which means that the first years were significantly less stressed than the third years. And the third and fourth years scored significantly higher than the first and second years, meaning that the third and fourth years were significantly less stressed than the first and second years. Next slide, please. So when we categorized it, it was in 4 or 5 categories. So the first year, the workload and performance pressure was a top stressor. For the second year, the performance pressure and workload were the top stressors. For third years, performance pressure and self-efficacy beliefs were the top stressors, and for the fourth years, it was self-efficacy beliefs and faculty and administration. Next slide, please. So for MOSDO, which is more relevant to the people sitting in this room, for workload being the stressor, first years scored significantly higher than the third years. First and second years scored significantly higher than the fourth years. Third year scores were significantly higher than fourth year scores. There wasn't a significant difference between first and second years in the stress associated with workload, and there wasn't a significant difference between second and third years. Workload showed a gradual decrease each year between the first and fourth year. So the stress sort of tapered off as the students progressed in their dental career. Patient treatment was another top stressor. Third and fourth year scores were significantly higher than first and second year. We predict that this is because we're in the St. Louis Dental Center actually treating patients on a day-to-day basis. And faculty and administration. Now, I want to make a note that that's the name of the category, but the question asked in the survey was, I have a reliable and trustworthy mentor who supports me in my student role. And a lot of students answered that they strongly disagree with this statement. We predict that it's because that we are a satellite campus, which means a lot of our faculty are in Kirksville, half of them are here, and it's a little more difficult for us to reach out and speak with them about the different things that we may want to talk to them about. There was a gradual increase in this category observed each year from the first year all the way up to the fourth year. Next slide, please. So top stressors by class for MOSDO. For first years, workload and performance pressure caused the most stress. For second years, it was workload and the faculty and administration. Third year, faculty and administration, performance pressure, and fourth year, faculty and administration and performance pressure. Something to note, the third and the fourth years kind of scored in a similar category. Again, we think it's because of the satellite campus and the fact that COVID had a part to play in our ability to kind of really connect with our faculty in our first 2 years of dental school. Next slide, please. So these graphics just kind of display the data that we discussed earlier. Something to note for the med school side, which is on your left, performance pressure increased all the way up to third year and then saw a significant drop. And there was a similar trend on the dental school side, except that everything kind of increased in the third year. Again, that was between the transition of moving from Kirksville to St. Louis. Stress seemed to increase in almost every single category, and then it slowly tapered off moving into the fourth year. Next slide, please. So comparison, this study or this research project has been completed before, more specifically gearing questions towards COVID-19 and the effect that it had on the emotional health of students. The 2020 study indicated that dental and medical students felt pressure from the added responsibility and stressors associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, such as social distancing. Our study demonstrated that there were significant differences between second and third years of stress levels contributed by social distancing. Also, just with the transition from Kirksville to the St. Louis Dental Center and all the added responsibilities that came with that. A key note to take home, the positive influences. So a consistent positive contributor to the mental health of all the ATSU students, both the medical and dental side, for all 4 years was the support of family and friends. The survey questions indicated that students who felt that they had a strong support system in place had significantly less stress on the social stressors. Next slide, please. So the discussion, this study sought to compare the psychological stressors and positive influences between medical and dental students attending school in the Midwest throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. We sought to see how these schools impact the school and the stresses associated with it impact the mental health of the respective students and how COVID-19 has affected those specific stressors. We found that social interaction and peer support were strong positive influences, and when taken away during quarantine, it severely negatively impacted students from both programs of all years in a negative way. We feel that further research is always needed to see how school administrators across the nation can adjust the dynamics of mental health awareness and change policies to help positively influence the mental health and social stressors of these students. Next slide, please. In conclusion, it's pretty obvious that professional school, both dental and medical, are pretty stressful times for their students. The results of this study highlight that some of the psychological stressors and positive influences that can impact students are important to take note of. That mental health it's a topic that's been in the hot seat all across the country, and we feel that it's important that it gets the attention that it deserves. Our study suggests that there's a gradual decrease in stress associated with the workload, starting from the first year all the way to the fourth year, but performance pressure increases I mean, it's the highest in the earliest years of education, and it will slowly decrease. The results of our study can help educators and mental health professionals better understand the unique challenges that students face during their professional school years and to develop strategies to support their mental health and well-being. Next slide, please. Some limitations, future considerations, and lessons learned. The potential limitations of the study was the time of the year that students were surveyed and the fact that we have a satellite campus. Like I said, our survey went out in January of this year. Now, had we sent this out, let's say in August, I'm sure that the first year dental students would have felt a little more stressed about certain things, kind of like we all did. That satellite campus, we feel that it played a really big part in faculty and administration being a top scoring stressing category. With our staff or our faculty kind of being strewn across the state, it makes it more difficult to really reach out to them and connect to them once you graduate from that campus. Further research is definitely needed in this area at ATSU, along with dental school and professional schools all across the country. It's important to investigate ways to decrease the large burden of stress experienced by the population in question, and it'll help students to develop a close relationship with their mentor to feel more accomplished and to feel more supported throughout their dental school and med school career. Next slide, please. We want to say a special thanks to Dr. Omar and Dr. Abels for their guidance through this. We also want to thank Mary Wang, our biostatistician, for her hard work and assisting us with our data collection. And we want to thank all of you guys for participating in this study. The project would not have been possible without you guys. Next slide, please. Any questions?
Thank you. Since we know that administration's here and we know that their problems are their problems, okay? Sorry, where's Dr. Jane? There she is. As faculty, what is our role here in this stressor thing? Can you put some words to what's our involvement?
Sure. So unfortunately, we didn't have many questions that specifically analyzed the different parts of what students felt caused stress by faculty or took away stress by faculty. It was just a generalized question that asked that did they feel that they had a reliable and trustworthy mentor who supported them in their student role. Unfortunately, the results indicated that they strongly disagreed with that statement, and it could have been for any number of reasons, but unfortunately, our study didn't specifically focus on that aspect of it. We were just trying to gather general stressors and to see how they affected the emotional health of students.
I didn't know if it was availability, if it was, we're holding
Right.
different directions, but it was just faculty as a total, we are a stressor kind of question.
Again, I wouldn't say that faculty is. No, I wouldn't say that faculty was indicated to be a stressor directly. I think that the role that faculty plays didn't help to alleviate any stress necessarily. Again, I think it's an important point that you bring up, the fact that this was a high scoring stress category for 3 different dental levels, like second year, third year, and fourth years. I think in a future study, it's really important that we include more questions in that category. So that way, faculty, administration, anybody can take that information and sort of hope to alleviate some of that stress and, kind of change some things to get things, I guess, in the right direction there. Thank you for bringing that up.
I raised my hand first. But thank you for addressing this very important topic, Rajiv. I have a couple of questions coming from the dark side, according to Dr. David Greaves. But to clarify, the only question that your survey asked about the role of faculty and administration had to do with mentorship?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
That was the only question. And like I said, I think now that we know it's a high scoring category, it's really important, if anybody chooses to continue the study, that we put more specific questions in there to get a better understanding of what part of it is causing that stress.
Okay. So, I just wanted to make a general comment. ADIA has done a lot of work looking at mental health of our students in dental education across the nation. And one of their chief findings, and you might have already reviewed that during your lit review, one of the major findings of the ADIA nationwide survey study has been lack of good mentorship for dental students across the nation. So administrations across the nation are working on providing mentors, consistent mentors from D1 to D4 years. But then I have another question. That had to do with, and I might have missed it, you might have referenced it early on, the demographics, but did you study medical students also at KCOM from M1 to M4 years? And did you find similarly that their stress, which by the way was very nice to know that stress decreases as the students progress from D1 to D4 years, so it's lower in D3, D4 years compared to the earlier two, which is consistent with studies done across the nation, by the way. Was that true of the medical students as well? I'm just curious.
So, just to clarify, are you asking that did med students signify that faculty and administration was it a top stressor for them? Is that the question that you're asking?
No, the stress levels you indicated in D3, D4 years were significantly lower than in D1, D2 years. Was that similar for medical students?
Yes.
So their stress went down.
It tapered off. The only category that we saw a significant increase in for med students compared to dental students was a category for self-efficacy. Med students signified that they were significantly more stressed in their third and fourth years about being self-efficient after graduation compared to dental students, saying that none of the dental students first year through fourth year, that was not a top scoring category for them at all. So that was the only category that increased. Everything else did decrease.
Thank you.